Hello. Don't forget to like and subscribe before starting the video. Who is James Buchanan? James Buchanan was born into a modest family on April 23, 1791, in Cove Gap, near Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. His father, James Buchanan Sr., was a successful merchant and farmer, while his mother, Elizabeth Spear, came from a well-respected family. Despite their limited means, Buchanan's parents recognized the value of education and ensured that their son received a solid foundation. Buchanan attended local schools and demonstrated academic aptitude from an early age. In 1807, he enrolled at Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where he excelled in his studies and exhibited a keen interest in the law. After graduating in 1809, he continued his legal education and was admitted to the bar in 1812, at the age of 21. Buchanan's political career began in the Pennsylvania state legislature, where he served from 1814 to 1816 as a Federalist. He quickly gained recognition for his eloquence, legal acumen, and ability to navigate political complexities. Despite the decline of the Federalist Party, Buchanan remained active in Pennsylvania politics and eventually aligned himself with the Democratic-Republican Party, later known as the Democratic Party. In 1821, Buchanan's political career took a significant leap when he was elected to the United States House of Representatives. During his tenure in the House, 1821 to 1831, he championed a pro-Jacksonian agenda and supported Andrew Jackson's presidential bids. Buchanan's loyalty and political acumen caught the attention of Jackson, who appointed him minister to Russia in 1832. After serving as minister to Russia, Buchanan continued his diplomatic career by becoming the United States Minister to the United Kingdom from 1853 to 1856. His experience and diplomatic successes further enhanced his reputation and set the stage for his return to American politics. After returning from his diplomatic posts, Buchanan ran for the United States Senate in 1834 and won the seat. He served in the Senate from 1834 to 1845, becoming a prominent figure within the Democratic Party. Buchanan played a crucial role in drafting the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the subsequent Compromise of 1850, both of which aimed to address the issue of slavery's expansion. In 1845, President James K. Polk appointed Buchanan as his Secretary of State. As Secretary of State, he skillfully navigated various international issues, including the Oregon boundary dispute with Britain and the acquisition of California and New Mexico during the Mexican-American War. His work in this role further solidified his reputation as an experienced statesman. Buchanan made unsuccessful bids for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1844 and 1848, but his popularity and political experience made him a front-runner for the nomination in 1856. At the Democratic National Convention, he secured the nomination and went on to win the presidency in a highly contentious election. James Buchanan was the 15th President of the United States, serving from 1857 to 1861. James Buchanan assumed office on March 4, 1857, at a time when the nation was sharply divided over the issue of slavery. The antebellum period was marked by growing tensions between the North and the South, primarily revolving around the expansion of slavery into newly acquired territories. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the Compromise of 1850 attempted to temporarily ease these tensions, but they did not provide a lasting resolution. The issue of slavery, coupled with the question of states' rights, had become the defining and most contentious political and moral debate in the United States. As the country expanded westward, the conflict over whether new states should be slave or free ignited further strife. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed settlers to decide whether to allow slavery in their territories, led to violent clashes between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions, giving rise to the term, Bleeding Kansas. The Dred Scott v. Sandford Supreme Court decision in 1857 further deepened the divide, as it ruled that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, could not be citizens of the United States, and Congress could not prohibit slavery in the territories. Furthermore, Buchanan's response to the secession crisis in the wake of Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860 is a topic of intense debate. While he argued that states did not have the right to secede, He also believed that the federal government lacked the authority to force them back into the Union. This stance was seen as weak and allowed the secessionist movement to gain momentum, ultimately leading to the formation of the Confederate States of America in early 1861. Slavery had been a contentious issue throughout American history, and by the time Buchanan assumed office in 1857, it had reached a critical juncture. The question of whether slavery should be allowed in the newly acquired territories from the Mexican-American War, particularly Kansas and Nebraska, had sparked violent clashes and bitter divisions between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. Buchanan's stance on slavery and the territories would significantly influence the nation's path toward civil war. Despite knowing that the Constitution was a product of fraudulent voting and did not represent the true will of the people, Buchanan endorsed it and urged Congress to admit Kansas as a slave state. This decision further inflamed tensions and intensified the animosity between the North and the South. In 1857, Buchanan faced a significant test of his leadership when the pro-slavery government of Kansas submitted the Lecompton Constitution for statehood. Dred Scott v. Sanford decision. In 1857, the Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in the Dred Scott case, which declared that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, were not citizens of the United States and therefore could not sue in federal court. Additionally, the court declared that Congress had no authority to ban slavery in the territories. Buchanan, a staunch believer in states' rights, supported the decision, but this only deepened the divide between the North and the South and heightened fears among Northerners that slavery would spread uncontrollably. Buchanan's approach to the slavery issue and states' rights was often perceived as weak and indecisive. Rather than taking a strong stance to address the growing tensions and assert federal authority, he opted for a conciliatory approach, hoping to preserve the Union through compromise and peaceful means. However, this only emboldened secessionist sentiments in the South and alienated many Northerners who sought decisive action. As the secession crisis escalated, Buchanan attempted to find a resolution through the proposed Crittenden Compromise. This compromise aimed to extend the Missouri Compromise line to the Pacific, guaranteeing the protection of slavery in Southern territories and appeasing Southern states. However, the compromise failed to gain sufficient support, and by the time Buchanan left office, secession had already begun. Buchanan's foreign policy decisions also faced criticism, particularly his handling of the Ostend Manifesto in 1854. The document, drafted by American diplomats in Europe, advocated for the acquisition of Cuba from Spain by any means necessary, including the use of force if Spain refused to sell. The manifesto was leaked to the public and caused a diplomatic embarrassment for the Buchanan administration. While it was eventually disavowed, the incident heightened sectional tensions and further strained relations with Spain and European powers. Buchanan's tenure also saw important diplomatic efforts in relation to Great Britain. The settlement of the Oregon boundary dispute in 1846 was a significant achievement, securing the territory for the United States and avoiding potential conflict with Britain. Additionally, Buchanan negotiated the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty in 1850, which aimed to ensure that neither the United States nor Britain would have exclusive control over a potential trans-Isthmian canal across Central America. This treaty laid the groundwork for future developments in the construction of the Panama Canal. Buchanan's inaction during this crucial period allowed the secessionist movement to gain momentum and solidify, with Southern states establishing the Confederate States of America in February 1861. His failure to take a firm stand against secession and his reluctance to use the full power of the federal government to preserve the Union has been heavily criticized by historians. Many believe that strong and decisive leadership at this critical juncture could have averted the Civil War or at least delayed its outbreak. Another highly controversial decision during Buchanan's presidency was his support for the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution in Kansas. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 had allowed settlers in the Kansas Territory to decide whether to permit slavery within their borders, leading to intense and often violent clashes between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers. In 1857, a pro-slavery territorial government in Kansas drafted the Lecompton Constitution, which aimed to admit Kansas as a slave state. However, this constitution was the result of fraudulent elections, as many anti-slavery settlers boycotted the process. Despite knowing about the fraudulent nature of the document, Buchanan endorsed it and urged Congress to admit Kansas as a slave state. Buchanan's support for the Lecompton Constitution was seen as a betrayal by many Northerners who believed that the process had been tainted and did not represent the true will of the people of Kansas. The controversy further deepened the sectional divide and exacerbated tensions between the North and the South. It also damaged Buchanan's reputation as a fair and impartial leader and strengthened the perception that he favored the interests of the Southern states over those of the North. Buchanan's indecisiveness and unwillingness to challenge the prevailing status quo regarding slavery only emboldened secessionist sentiments in the South and weakened the federal government's authority. By the time he left office in March 1861, the secession movement had gained significant traction, and the nation was on the brink of civil war. Historians often criticize Buchanan for his lack of leadership and vision during this crucial period. Instead of addressing the pressing issues head-on and taking proactive steps to preserve the Union, Buchanan's inaction and passivity allowed the crisis to escalate and ultimately culminated in the outbreak of the Civil War shortly after his successor, Abraham Lincoln, assumed the presidency. Buchanan's failure to assert federal authority and his reluctance to confront the realities of the growing divide have cemented his legacy as one of America's most ineffective and controversial presidents. Ultimately, historical lessons offer an opportunity to learn from the past and apply those lessons to the present and future. By critically examining the successes and failures of past leaders, we can strive to build a more inclusive, united, and resilient society. It is through a collective understanding of historical leadership that we can shape a better path forward for our nation and the world. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future.